Hello, everybody. Shalom, shalom. Today we have the rare privilege of convening with two diplomatic voices in our region, the Consul General for the Midwest and the Consul General of the Midwest for Israel and the Consul General of the Midwest for Germany. And I think this is a very, very timely conversation. So let me introduce you to our guests. Consul General Elad Strohmayer is the Consul General of Israel to the Midwest based in Chicago. Elad's a career diplomat with 16 years of experience in the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Before arriving in Chicago, he served as Director of Congressional Affairs, Department of the North American Division of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Jerusalem. His previous diplomatic missions included serving as spokesperson of the Israeli Embassy in Washington, D.C., Deputy Consul General in Philadelphia, and Deputy Ambassador to Luanda, Angola. Before joining the Israeli Foreign Service, he worked for the Jewish Agency. He's a native of Bat Yam in central Israel, just outside of Tel Aviv. Elad brings a global perspective and a strong commitment to building partnerships across the Midwest, including the Latino, African American, and LGBTQ communities. And we are very, very grateful to have Elad as part of our community. Next, we are welcoming General Consul Michael Ahrens of Germany. And let me tell you a little bit about Michael. Michael Ahrens took up his position as Consul General of Germany in Chicago in August of 2023. He's a career diplomat of more than 3 decades, having joined the German diplomatic service in 1989. Before arriving in Chicago, Michael served as Minister Counselor for Security and Defense Policy at the German Embassy in Washington, D.C. Prior to that, he was Deputy Head of Division for Humanitarian Assistance at the Federal Foreign Ministry in Berlin. His earlier posting included Counselor for Cultural and Legal Affairs at the German Embassy in Seoul, Counsel at the German Consulate General in San Francisco, and postings in Shanghai and work on humanitarian assistance in Asia. Michael has been an active spokesperson and a champion of the Midwest German economic ties, noting that the Chicago, Southern Wisconsin, Northern Indiana corridor is home to the largest concentration of German-owned company subsidiaries in the entire United States. A fact that surprises many, including me, underscores the deep commercial and cultural bonds between Germany and this region. I want to say that you can see the world by joining the consular service. But between the two of you, you've been, just looking at a pin map of the world, and you've been in all those places. And so I thank you for making time for us today. I want to begin by thinking about Germany and Israel today. Germany's post-war relationship with Israel has rested, from what I can understand, on 2 pillars: a moral obligation born of the Shoah, the Holocaust, and a commitment to universal norms and international law. And I think we can say with some surety that October 7th tested both pillars. And Germany's response has been notably more steadfast than most of Germany's European neighbors. So I think it's safe to say that Germany has been the most consistent European voice in Israel's defense since October 7th. And that has come at a real political cost, given the size and activism of Germany's Muslim community and the pressures from the European left. And so we want to explore a little bit of what that cost has been. And do you think, Consul General Ahrens, that Germany has received sufficient credit for the positions that it's taken?
Thank you, Michael. Yeah, I mean, you characterized, I think, pretty well the relationship between Germany and Israel. And I mean, I believe we've received a lot of credit both from Israel and also within the US. And I think states and nations who are like aligned with us, of course, we have received credit, but of course, as you mentioned, so not everybody has the same opinion, and probably we received also a lot of criticism. I remember here also I had to kind of receive a delegation from Palestinian Americans here in the consulate, and of course there we received a lot of criticism for our stance and for our steadfast support of Israel. But I mean, there I think everybody in politics in Germany has always been crystal clear that this is a historic kind of historic obligation for Germany, and that nobody takes it lightly, and that we stand by Israel and Israel's right to exist and Israel's safety, and also Israel's right to defend itself unequivocally. So no matter if we have criticism about it. But I believe if we talk to somebody in Israel, or if I talk to people from the Jewish communities or Jewish organizations here, I think everybody voiced like appreciation, and we really are always very heartened by that this support, especially if it comes to the Jewish community, is recognized.
Elad, you and I spoke, and you told me what a special relationship you have with Consul General Ahrens. And I was wondering if you could talk about that and respond to how you perceive Germany's support. And is there one thing that you would point to since October 7th where Germany has stood apart?
Thank you, both Michaels. I'm the exception today. First, I would say that it's so true to say that the relationship between Germany and Israel are unique and special. And I'm an expert of the Israel-US relations, as you can hear from my experience, and that's most of my experience in the diplomatic corps. But I think when it comes to Europe, and aside from the United States, Germany is the closest thing that we have to an alliance with a country that is not the United States, because Germany is unique and is supportive, and the relationship is built on many, many layers of cooperation and understanding and shared values and shared interest and working together. I'm fairly new here still in Chicago, and Consul General Ahrens, remember in our first meeting, I said that it's easy for Israel and Germany and the consulates to do things around the Holocaust. I want us to go beyond that because the relationship between Germany and Israel, maybe the Holocaust are the roots that explain that unique relationship, but they're much bigger than that, much more than that. And I think it's our responsibility to bring more content to this relationship to show that it's not just because of the Holocaust. And I will be Israeli for a second and I'll be blunt. Some people blame Germany that because of their guilt, they treat Israel differently. And I would argue this is not a fair thing to say because I think Germany sees Israel as an ally, as an important ally, and we see Germany as such as well. And we need to make sure people understand the depth of this relationship. When we work here in the United States, we have the embassy in Washington and 8 consulates. In Europe, we don't have consulates in Europe aside from Germany. We have the embassy in Berlin and we have a consulate in Munich. That shows again the importance that we look at Germany when we build our diplomatic ties and diplomatic relations. I will say one more thing. You talk about the relationship, and Michael, I hope it's okay that I'll say it. I think the fact that both of us are openly gay men helps with a friendship between us. And it's important because we share a lot of the same values and the way we see the world, aside from each representing their own country. And that helps a lot to really build that friendship.
It's noteworthy that we are actually approaching Gay Pride weekend here in Chicago. And I think it says a lot about both countries that we can celebrate the LGBTQ community as well as we speak with each other. Continuing on, this idea of this special relationship has always carried, I think, a special weight. But since October 7th, I think there has been a strain, and Israel has experienced that with many countries. So I'm going to look to you, Michael, and ask, is there something that each side wishes the other would say publicly that it has not said? Now I'm going to ask you the same question, Elad. Is there something that you wish that the Germans would have said at some point? Do you wish, Michael, that there's something that Israelis would have said at some point that they didn't say?
Oh, that's a really difficult question. I mean, I think you also have to probably distinguish between like Israeli politicians or Israeli population. I mean, Israelis who live in Germany, the Jewish community. I mean, like there's so many different. Also, like Israel is not a monolithic block, so there's like so many different facets also in Israeli society. And I think what maybe one part of society said, the other is not saying. I mean, it's no secret that in Germany, especially before October 7, but still, I think people are committed also to a two-state solution, also to have a state for the Palestinian people, and that's what again think understandable. There's not like something that's on very high on the agenda in Israeli politics at the moment. That's probably something German population would like to hear more. What is also the plan in Israel for the Palestinians following now the war in Gaza, and what could be really a feasible future solution where Israeli and Palestinians live in peace side by side?
Michael, you went right into the area that I was going to go into next. So, Elad, I think it's safe to say that very few Israelis presently think seriously about a two-state solution. And I think what Michael was referring to was the idea that so much of Germany, the German policy in regards to Israel, has been anchored in a two-state solution. So what do you have to say to Michael in terms of that? Because it's a great question, and I think it's an important one for our listeners to consider.
So it really connects also to your original question, what I want to hear that maybe has not been said. At the beginning, when you said it, I thought it's a bit of an unfair question because really Germany is such a good friend of Israel. And even when they say things we don't like to hear every once in a while, it happens. This is what friends do. This is what friends say. And I don't think it should or it is affecting our friendship at all. But from your question and discussion of the two-state solution, I think it's not a matter of what I want German officials to say, but maybe German officials and the German people to understand when we talk about the two-state solution right now, many Israelis are not there because there is a matter of trust and they need to understand where Israel is. It's a problem. We disengaged from Gaza and look where it brought us. So many Israelis think if we're going to create a Palestinian state, it will lead us to another October 7th now from the West Bank. And there is a lot of fear. Now, I respect that the fact that it's not just Germany, many other countries have this perspective about the solution and the two-state solution. But putting politics aside for a moment, they need to understand where the Israeli public is. And they need to understand that when they come right now, when we're with our pain, and that Hamas is still controlling Gaza and not the rule is not over yet, and while there's still terror threats against Israel, including from Hezbollah and other places, talking about territorial concessions and talking about giving up land and giving sovereignty to the Palestinians, it's not something that Israelis can imagine at the moment because we want security to our people. And I'm hope that you've seen from the way I phrase it, it's not a question of politics and what the politicians are saying. It's where the Israeli public is. Of course, there are people in the Israeli public that support the two-state solution. But if you overwhelmingly look at the majority of the Israeli people, they're not there yet, especially because of the pain, especially because of the fear. And I think it'll be wise for people to acknowledge that And instead of, and I'm not saying that this is what Germany is doing, but I'm generalizing, instead of coming and lecturing to Israel, this is what you need to do, this is what you need to do, it just alienates a lot of the Israeli public. You need more engagement with them in a way that will make them understand that our security concerns and that our fears are being respected and acknowledged. And I think this is what needed when we talk about the two-state solution. Overall, and it's not Germany, it's everywhere. It's here in the United States. When I speak with people who advocate for that as well, they need to understand where we are at the moment. And that's something that is sometimes difficult because if you don't live in Israel and you don't talk to Israelis, you don't necessarily know that. I do want to commend the German ambassador to Israel that is doing a phenomenal job going around the country, speaking with Israelis, listen to Israelis, and understanding where we're coming from. I wish we had more European ambassadors and other foreign ambassadors doing so. Again, on top of my mind right now, if I need to think of two friendly ambassadors, is the American ambassador and the German ambassadors that are speaking to people and understanding where Israelis are coming from, speaking volume to the depth of the relationship of our countries.
Michael, do you want to respond?
Yes, no, I totally understand that also now at the moment there's a lot of fear, and this is not at the top of the mind, and it is probably difficult for people who are not living in Israel to always understand that. I mean, for example, we had like a member here of the German community in Chicago whose sister was visiting the music festival and was killed during October 7. She was just from Germany as a tourist for 2 weeks, staying with Israeli friends, and then was killed on October 7. So also, I mean, people around her have like a different perspective because there's also this kind of like personal story behind it. If you're like in Germany and then just follow the media, then of course it's, I think, more difficult for the ordinary German to understand what Israelis are going through. So therefore, so I think Ambassador Seibert is doing a great job. He's like also wandering through it, like really actually wandering, like walking through Israel, speaking through people. But then also he's like, and Elad said that also amongst friends, you also have to be able to say something if there's something you think is not correct. And then he's also often heavily criticized for that in Israel.
I want to shift this a little bit, and I want to think about anti-Semitism in Germany and in Europe. Germany's post-war identity, I think it's safe to say, has been built partially on the promise of never again. When 68% of Jewish community leaders in Germany report feeling unsafe in 2026, that is not a failure of intention. Germany's intentions are not in doubt. But how do you understand the changes in Germany today? And when you have a proportion of the Jewish community that is not feeling supported by German civil society, it's fallen from 62% in 2023 to 35% in 2026, how do you understand, Michael, this shift in Germany?
Yeah, of course, this is of grave concern to me personally, and also to leaders in Germany. Yeah, in the aftermath of October 7, the like anti-Semitic incidents have been on the rise, and I think a variety of factors. You alluded to it. There's like, of course, we have migration from Arabic countries or people with Muslim background. We have, and of course, a lot of media reporting on the war in Gaza. So I think there are a lot of factors, and what we always say is can be legitimate to criticize the Israeli government for certain actions, but you cannot criticize Israel as a state, or this cannot be like an excuse for anti-Semitism. And I feel the lines have been somehow blurred. Just something some people feel, okay, so and don't agree with how the war in Gaza was going on. So I'm kind of like feel it's legitimate for me to say like this is something. It's the fault of the Jewish people. It's not the fault of the Israeli government. So that's why legitimate criticism is okay, but the lines have definitely been blurred. And um, I mean, it's difficult to say what can. I mean, we always say, and the politicians say, and I think everybody's on the same line that this is, except for the fringes, which in like you have the very far left and the very far right, who are like kind of also problematic in what they are saying. But I mean, 80% of the mainstream politicians, everybody agrees in that this is like a whole of society task. Also, no public funding for any cultural events or like universities where like anti-Semitic incidents are happening or that support BDS. So there's like a lot of things Germany has done. I mean, also freedom of speech is more restricted than in the US, so it's not allowed to wave a Hamas flag. It's not allowed to say certain things in public demonstrations, and the police is also enforcing that. So I think there's a lot also the police and politicians are doing. So you have to somehow take all of society with you, and for that, I think education is very important. And this is something just we cannot let up in education about also the special responsibility of Germany and what happened in Germany, and therefore, I think we have to double down on that part. The federal president Steinmeier actually said in a TV speech also like the worst thing people can do is to forget.
I really, really appreciate what you're saying, Michael, very, very much. I know all of our listeners do. Elad, do you think you've spent a lot of time in the United States? Do you think that Israelis are more understanding of Germany than American Jews are? Do you think American Jews are more reactive to Germany than Israeli Jews are?
It's a good question. Before I answer that, I just want to again, like you did, thank you, Michael, for what you said about anti-Semitism. Because again, I'm not an expert of Germany, but the way you were very clear about what is acceptable and not acceptable and what we need to fight and everything, I don't hear it enough. So maybe in Germany you hear it enough. I don't hear it enough here in the United States. And it's becoming a problem. It's becoming a problem exactly for the reasons that you're talking about, the lines that are blurred from legitimate criticism towards Israel and anti Semitism and anti Israel in the essence of the existence of Israel. And I feel like the lines have been crossed here in the United States. And maybe in Germany you're better in dealing with it. Maybe again, I'm not an expert. If I was, maybe I could have bring other challenges that you're facing. And we need to acknowledge you touched it as well, and we need to be able to say it without being blamed of xenophobia or any other forms of hatred. For years we talked about anti-Semitism from the far right. Today there is anti-Semitism also from the far left and from Muslim immigrants here in the United States and in Germany. It doesn't mean that the anti-Semitism from the far right doesn't exist anymore. It still exists, but that there's new forms of anti-Semitism that were not so powerful. And we need to talk about all of them and fight about all of them. And it's not, when we talk about it, we're not now generalizing about all the groups. We're just saying that there are problems there and we need to fight it. And you saying it for the way you said it, it was so important. I really appreciate that. So thank you. And I hope Americans will listen to that and will say it the same way that you said it and the way it's been treated in Germany. I really hope so. Now, to your question, Rabbi Siegel, about how Israelis see and understand Germany, it's an interesting question because eventually Germany is a European country, and in many ways, culturally, we're closer. There are a lot of similarities, also a lot of differences between Germans and Israelis. And a lot of Israelis travel to Germany. There are a lot of German volunteers coming to Israel. So we know there is a lot of knowledge and recognition between the people. So I think in many ways for Israelis, it may be a little bit easier to understand Germany than American Jews. Because overall, here in America, and it might sound as criticism, it's not, you're very centered about what's happening here in America. Like the average American doesn't travel much in the world. When people are well traveled, it's like something unique in the United States. But in Israel and in Europe, we travel a lot. and also hopping on a plane to Germany. We have so many direct flights to Berlin and to Munich and to Frankfurt, and to Hamburg from Israel. It's very, very easy. So we can learn more about Germany very easily, compare to American Jews or a general American, that it's more complicated for them to travel to Germany and learn about the culture. And also, it's a question that it's not fair to ask me. I am of Austrian heritage, so no, Austria is different from Germany, but there is a lot of similarities in the culture and, of course, in the language. And I remember when I was in university, I was talking with German volunteers that came to Israel and they were not Jewish. And I was intrigued. Why you're not Jewish and you come to volunteer in Israel and you care about Israel? And I learned so much from these people that came to Israel. You don't see German volunteers coming like that to the United States and meet with the American Jewish community. So they don't have that visibility that we have in Israel in that sense. And yet, yes, there are cultural differences. We all sometimes lovingly joking about our cultural differences between us, and it's okay. But I think there is a better understanding from the Israeli perspective about Germany. That's my gut feeling, at least, my sense of it.
How comparable is the anti-Semitism that you are experiencing in the United States and seeing both on the right and the left? How does it compare to what's happening in Europe? Michael, what do you think?
That's a difficult question. I also want to add something to what I said before, because I didn't want to make it sound like overall the Muslim communities in Germany tend to be anti-Semitic. I mean, there's a lot of mainstream communities and it's a dialogue of religions, and it's a lot of people who are like participating in that, and good relations. But there are also some, I mean, you saw some of the unfortunate scenes on German streets after October 7th. There's also some people who came who are kind of like don't have this respectful understanding of how to treat other religions, but that's what I wanted to say, not to like judge a whole group as such. I mean, it's really, I don't know if that's an easy question to answer. I think just what makes it more difficult here, or in Germany, you still have really this incidents against like signs of Jewish communities, let's say Jewish cemeteries. Maybe there's like somebody spray paints them, or Jewish schools and Jewish synagogues, and they're just still more of something that is special and not seen everywhere, whereas probably the Jewish community in the US is much more mainstream. So maybe the way also anti-Semitism shows its face here is different, because it's also different because you can say many more things without being punished for it. And in Germany, you cannot. So in Germany, it's probably less spoken, but more like vandalism or something, yeah, some defect, sorry, I don't know that English word, I've just realized. So kind of deface like a public memorial or something like that, which probably there's not that much going on in the US. In the US, it might be more really insults and spoken word, but this is, I'm not really a 100% expert on this.
But the laws are much stricter in Germany.
Yes.
And is there a resentment in Germany about those laws?
No, I feel overall, so also we are sometimes being criticized by the US government for having not like the unlimited freedom of speech that people in the US have, but I feel the overall sentiment in Germany is that it's okay that certain things are punishable. So also like grave insults, libel, and other things. And I think also people agree that whatever is punishable, what you shouldn't be able to say in person, you also shouldn't be able to say online. There shouldn't be a special place online where you can say things without impunity. And I think overall, the majority of the population agrees that those are good rules, and also like to try to keep everything civil.
Elad, how do you respond?
Again, my main focus is here in the United States, so I can relate to things either from seeing it in the media and being the spokesperson of the Israeli embassy in the past. I know not to believe the media so much. And from what I hear from Michael, uh, to whom I do believe, unlike the media. So I would say that my sense, and again, this is my sense, is that because of the history, because of the pain, because of the understanding where it led, there is a better understanding in Germany about the dangers of hatred and anti Semitism and where it can lead. And that's why they're fighting it very, very fiercely. And here, not that people don't fight it, but I think at the moment, and I said many times in other public engagement, that the genie is out of the box. People were always anti-Semites. You know, anti-Semitism always existed. Bigotry and racism always existed. It will always exist. But it was not popular and it was not politically correct. Today it is, actually. So people allow themselves say things that in the past were not acceptable. And while in Germany, you'll still get like a hammer on your head, like for saying something that is anti-Semitic or behaving like that. Here, because of the freedom of speech, exactly the way Michael described it, well, people are entitled to say what they want to say. And also there's some understanding. Well, we can understand because of what's happening in Israel, and we need to make people understand that that's the reality. Exactly like Michael said it, the lines are blurred, the lines are blurred, and we have a big problem there. um, and I'm happy to hear that in Germany they take it very seriously. I think history taught them to take it seriously, and I don't want it to be the case here. I don't think we'll get there, but we still need to understand where it can lead in other ways. And that's why we see the increase of hate crimes against Jews here. The level of security, by the way, that's also true to Europe and Germany. I remember when I visited Berlin and I wanted to go to the synagogue, the levels of security that you need to go into to go to a synagogue, it's ridiculous, to be honest. It's a place of worship. We don't need to go through that security. That's because hate has been normalized, and I think we need to fight that. Now, I want to ask a question, Michael. I really don't know. I don't know if you have the answer. In Germany, for example, the security for the Jewish synagogue, who's responsible for that? Is that the government? Who pays for it? Is that the community or the government? Because here, that's a big debate. Why do the Jewish community needs to pay for its own security if the government cannot like supply security to the community? Churches and mosques don't need to pay for security, only Jewish community needs to. So how does it work in Germany? Is it also sponsored by the community, or there are government funding and the government is responsible for that?
As far as I know, all Jewish institutions, be there synagogues, but also schools or something, have like official police protection, which is paid for by the state.
And even if there is some participation on behalf of the Jewish community, the fact that there is government police shows how serious the German government is taking that. And I think the US authorities should learn from that. Now, I understand the United States is more complicated, federal government versus state, but the states should do their job and the federal government to defend the Jewish community. I'm sorry, I've been very blunt right now in speaking as an outsider about something internal here, but it's my people, the Jewish people, so I care, and this is why I'm saying that.
Listen, I wish that the United States would learn that lesson. It's a very important one, Elad, that you bring up. Let me ask something a little more pointed. We are living at a time where the lines are being blurred between anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. And at the same time, there is such a strong reaction to that in the Jewish community. I'm thinking more on the diaspora than in Israel, that people are very reticent to be critical of the Israeli government or things that are being said by some Israeli officials, for the fear that they're going to be accused of being anti-Semitic because they are criticizing Israel. Now, you know, Elad, and most of us know that Israelis themselves are the most critical population of their own government and what Israelis say. But I'm interested, Michael, in how that affects you. Do you feel that you can express yourself honestly, or do you feel like you need to really couch your criticisms very carefully to protect yourself from the charge of being anti-Semitic?
I mean, since I'm here in Chicago, fortunately, I'm not often asked to comment on actions by Israeli politicians. That's more for the foreign ministry in Berlin, or maybe sometimes the embassy has it. I mean, we're like from the policy side, I think there is criticism against some of the actions or remarks, for example, by Minister Smotrich, or sometimes by some of the actions of the Prime Minister. But yeah, of course, I think I would still, in my position, I would always be extremely careful to, like, in a public speech, criticize the Israeli government, especially since would be a little bit out of context, since it's not really my job here to do that. But also, yeah, I feel it's a good point. I don't know how within the, but you said like, it's interesting what you said. So you feel within the Jewish community, there's a kind of a self-censorship of criticism for fear, or just like within people outside of the Jewish community?
No, I think, well, no, I think in the United States and in the diaspora, there is self-censorship in public, and that's a very significant issue.
I I would sorry I would it's interesting because I cannot argue with feelings, and it's difficult, but I would argue that someone that gets the criticism eventually, I don't feel this self-censorship. I feel actually the opposite. I feel like we need to criticize the Israeli government in order to show that we're legitimate. We care about you and everything, but in order to show that we care, we need to show that we criticize the Israeli government. Or there is a tendency to say, well, we support Israel, we just don't like what your government is doing, which is a legitimate statement, by the way. I don't have a problem with that statement at all, but I actually feel that a lot of people are inclining to say it in order to say, well, I'm not blind supporting the Israeli government because of the rise of anti-Semitism here, and people being accused as part of this rise of anti-Semitism of dual loyalty, that there is loyalty to Israel and not loyalty to the United States, which is the oldest anti-Semitic trope of the dual loyalty. So immediately, a lot of people jump to say, "Oh, what? Why did this minister say that? Or why did Netanyahu did that?" And it doesn't matter if they agree, if I agree with that criticism or not. It doesn't matter. I'm just saying I feel like people are jumping the gun actually in order to be avoided of being perceived on dual loyalty. Even if I agree with the criticism, it doesn't matter. But again, I cannot argue with feelings. If people feel that they're afraid because there'll be a blame for anti-Semitism, that's something that we need to discuss, because I think we're all in agreement. Not blaming, criticizing my government is something of legitimate thing to do. It's not a problem at all. I can criticize your government and I can criticize Michael's government. It doesn't matter. It's legitimate. I'm just saying I'm not sure that I feel the same self-censorship that you're talking about, but it's difficult to argue with how people feel on that.
I think you're making a very important point, Elad. I think that we see this in the United States, in the American Jewish community, and I think it's refreshing to hear you say that we become stronger when we are willing to express our feelings honestly and be critical when things are worthy of criticism, and that's how we engage in thoughtful and meaningful conversations, what we would call in Hebrew a machloka l'shem shamayim, an argument for the sake of heaven. So let me shift gears here for a moment as we go into the final part of our conversation, and that is Iran. And I want to spend some time thinking about that because the news media is agog here in America with the agreement that is supposed to be signed on Friday, and there is a tremendous amount of trepidation, criticism, and I think real concern about what exactly has been agreed to. But if a deal is signed, even a partial one, what would be the first thing, Elad, that you would check in that document to see if it was there or not there? And what would be the first thing, Michael, that you would check for in that document? What's the single provision whose absence would make the deal, in your judgment, not worth the paper it's written on? Elad, I'm going to start with you.
I think there are many things that I would check, but if I need to start with number one, is how do we make sure that Iran doesn't move forward with their nuclear ambitions? Having statements that, oh, they promised or they say that they don't want to is not enough. We need to make sure how we get rid of their enriched uranium that they have there, and how we make sure that they will never have the capability of enriching uranium again in the future. And these are the things that are, for me right now, are the most important. And these were the problems in the past with previous deals, that they had sunset clause regarding enrichment, and that there was not enough supervision mechanism to make sure that they don't do it. So I think if I look at the nuclear component of it, to make sure how we get rid of all the enrichment uranium they have, and how we make sure that they won't be able to fool us again, and there's proper supervision that they don't do that. That's the one thing. But I would say as well that other elements that are important for us is the ballistic missiles, and also their support of the proxies, to make sure that they won't be able to support Hezbollah again, that they won't be able to support the Houthis, that they won't be able to support Hamas and the Shiite militias in Iraq and Syria, because this is what creates the instability in the Middle East. Their support of all these proxies organizations that destabilize, and also harming not just Israel, other U.S. allies and Israel allies in the Middle East, actually. These are the source of problems. If I look at Israel's relationship with Lebanon, for example, if Hezbollah did not exist, I think it would have been very, very easy to move forward to normalize relations between Israel and Lebanon. We're engaging in peace agreements right now, and behind closed doors, there is an agreement that Hezbollah is the problem there. There is an agreement that Hezbollah is the problem, and if it was not there, it's not that peace would erupt immediately. There are still differences, but it would have been easier if all these extremist forces won't be there. So in any future deal, aside from the nuclear, which is the number one, I would look at the regional, make sure that money that will be unfroze to Iran won't go again to support all these terrorist proxies, won't go again to develop ballistic missiles that can threaten Israel, the United States, Germany, and won't go again to their nuclear program. So that's the circle that I would check and look at any future deal with Iran.
Michael, what's the first thing you would be looking for in that deal?
Yeah, exactly the same. I mean, it has to be the nuclear dossier, because this is like the most important part, and this is also was the reason for the war to start. And really curious to see how they want to ensure that this is different from the JCPOA, which we had, and it has to be something that's like more strict than the JCPOA, because this is something President Trump came out of, and which maybe also started a little bit more stronger enrichment and everything that also led in the end now to the war. So you cannot just go back to the JCPOA. Then the last years were really like wasted years, but you have to be better than that, and you have to really make sure. I mean, of course, that Iran can never have a nuclear weapon, but also how to really enforce this. And I don't know. I haven't read anything that really convinces me that there's already like a good solution on the table.
So Germany and Israel actually share something in regards to this latest agreement, or assuming that it will be an agreement, and that is that neither country was at the table. Right? Israel was not consulted in a meaningful way. Germany or European countries were not being consulted. They didn't have a seat at the table. What does that tell you about the changing international relationships that are going on right now? Michael, I'll begin with you. What is that telling you about where Europe fits into all this, or NATO for that matter?
Yeah, I mean, overall, I think and that's a very legitimate also demand by the US administrations that Europe has to be able to guarantee its own safety. That's why we have the NATO summit coming up in Ankara. We have the new 5% goal to really, and that showed the war in of Russia in Ukraine, that also Germany shouldn't, or Europe shouldn't rely on the US to provide the security in Europe alone. We hope the US will always be part of the Euro-Atlantic safety zone, but overall, so also Germany has to be able to do more for its own safety. I mean, it's understandable that Germany was not at the table in discussions with Iran or even like in any decision making on the attack on or the start of the war. But then there's kind of like this reflex to say like, okay, so we started it, but now you have to do this and this and this and this, and NATO should do this. Kind of like not considering that NATO is a defensive alliance and it's not like an alliance, like an active alliance. And I mean, we're looking actively into also supporting the safety in the Strait of Hormuz and to have like some mine cleaning boats over there with also with kind of a coalition. But for Germany also to commit military to anywhere outside of Germany, we always need like a decision of the parliament. And that usually has to be based on some kind of mandate, be it EU or be it UN security mandate. So the kind of expectation of the US that, okay, so now we started it and now we have this problem. Now you have to follow us and have to do what we say. That didn't come over very well in Germany, and kind of like, I think also underscored the importance that we also invest in our own security and be able also to support European security.
So one would imagine that the German military will become more robust as we go forward.
I mean, the German military needs a lot of investment to be even able to fulfill basic, like kind of to guard the NATO territory, which is like a responsibility for the German armed forces. And now we have like 5,000, or in the future it will be 5,000 German soldiers stationed in Lithuania, like as a forward defense against for the NATO territory in Russia. I mean, we're now at like, I don't even know off the heart, I think 200,000, 220,000 active soldiers, which is probably less than we need to be able to ensure that NATO territory can be protected. But we discontinued the draft, so now it's a professional army. But then also now there was a discussion that if we cannot find enough people who voluntarily become like a professional soldier, that maybe the draft has to be reintroduced so that the army can be at this level as it is now, to at least fulfill all the capabilities that NATO requests of Germany to be able to fulfill. I mean, I wouldn't call it like a militarized Germany, but at least like go back to a level where we can like also support NATO in maintaining safety and security in the NATO territory.
Thank you for your answer. Elad, how are you feeling right about now?
You know, the president and the prime minister talk constantly, and I know that there are many reports of what been happening in these conversations, but as someone who was part of conversations like this in the past, not now because I'm here in Chicago, what you see in the media doesn't always reflect what really happens in these conversations. So eventually we have our concerns and we say it to the American government all the time, but it's not that we don't know what's happening and that we don't have that information necessarily. And I think, again, that's the nature of the relationship, that we share the information, we share our fears, we share our concerns, and they share what they believe that needs to be done. And each side eventually represent their interest in what we're thinking about that. The reality is that I think if we go to your previous question, that what are the most concerning things that we will look at the new agreement, and the fact that Michael and I gave de facto the same answer shows to prove that the relationship between Israel and Germany are very strong, based on a shared vision and understanding of how we see the Middle East and the future of the Middle East, the threats to the Middle East, and what are the solutions to the threats to move forward in the Middle East. And I think that vision is not so different than the vision of the United States. This is why this relationship are important. And yes, there are nuances, differences. I'm sure if we'll drill down on specific policies on many others, we just talked about the two-state solution. That's one of them. Yes, there are differences, but the overarching picture of the forces that threat the Middle East and what needs to be done to tackle them, we are in agreement, and that's with the United States. And then there's the micro tactic of how to do it. And history is always evolving and things shift. And we had disagreements in the past, and we will prevail and pass them. And like you said, it's not a done deal. Who knows what we'll do? One thing that we learned from Iran is that they always blow things up because eventually they want more than anyone is willing to give to them, and that's what we've seen in previous rounds of negotiations with them. So we'll see if they behave differently right now, because the president also has been very, very clear that if Iran is not gonna fulfill its obligation and not move forward, the military options are still there. He said it all the time. Uh, we hope we'll see what will happen. I hope that we'll can give a solution to that will secure security to Israel and to the region. That's my hope, and that's why I'm an optimistic. And we'll see. And I'm encouraged that we're all understanding and see the picture in a similar way.
I have one last question for you both. Last question. I'm very grateful for the time you've given me for this very important conversation. What do you wish the American Jewish community understood about your country's position on whatever subject that it presently does not? What do you wish the American Jewish community understood about your country's position on a given topic that it currently does not? What do you think, Elad?
It's a difficult one because I think overall the American Jewish community knows a lot about Israel and understand Israel. People have family in Israel. They travel extensively. One could number the number of delegations that you led, Rabbi, of your synagogue to Israel. And I remember in your farewell event, they talked about your honeymoon that was in Israel, leading a congregational delegation. So I think there is a better understanding. But overall, eventually, if you don't live in a place on a daily basis and live the threats and the challenges, you don't really understand how it is. Only when you live in a place, you understand that place. And that's true for me here. I never understood American Jewish community until I lived in America, in Philadelphia, Washington, and now in Chicago. And you know my story of being a shaliach before that. Only when I came here, I understood you in ways that I could never understand when I was in Israel. And I think that's the same way for the American Jewish community. Until you're in our shoes, and it doesn't mean that you're not entitled for your opinion and criticism, but until you're in our shoes, getting the threats of the rockets on a daily basis and the security, and it's difficult to understand that. And that's, I think, one of the main things. And it's also connect to politics because, you know, you and I had many conversation about that minister saying this and other ministers saying that. And I would say I'm not going to now defend whatever Minister X said on an issue, and I don't have a problem saying that publicly as well, because that person doesn't represent the government, because that's the political structure in Israel.
Mm-hmm.
In the United States, it's unheard of that a secretary, a cabinet secretary, will say something to counter the US president, whether it's Donald Trump, Joe Biden, Barack Obama, doesn't matter who. They won't do that because they serve to the pleasure of the president. But for us, when we have a coalition government, you have ministers, and it can be even a high-ranking minister. In the past, we had foreign ministers that contradicted the prime minister, for example. And then it's difficult for me to explain why a senior minister who's saying something, it's not actually the policy of the government. Until you don't live in that political system, you don't understand. And I'm not undermining the severity of some of the statements. And I'm not saying that the criticism is not justified. I'm just trying to put things in perspective when I look at it in the bigger picture. I wish that's something that I could better make American Jews understand, that realities in Israel of living in Israel and what we have in mind and our priorities because we live there and how it reflects in our very unique, sometimes dysfunctional, if you want, political system.
Thank you. Michael, what do you wish that the American Jewish community better appreciated and better understood about Germany?
It's a really a difficult question. I feel they have a pretty good understanding about Germany now and the German policies and German policy towards Israel. I feel this has nothing really to do necessarily with relations with the Jewish community, but for everybody in the US, I feel it's always difficult to grasp is really the construct of the EU. What's actually the role of the EU? That the EU is like also this big peace project. I mean, these are countries that have been at war for centuries that are together, and that also I think people here always see the EU as kind of like this huge bureaucratic monster. And why do you have that? And it's slowing you down, slowing down innovation. But they don't see really also how this came into being and what this brought together. I think this is something I would like people to know. And then also probably Jewish communities know this, but so I think it's also very easy if you live in Germany that you're not in your daily life meet people who are Jewish because just of the way of the Holocaust and to the Shoah. And where I grew up, there was a small Jewish community, but people were either killed or left by the time I went to school. And I think I went 18 years to school without meeting probably consciously a single member of the Jewish community until I joined the Foreign Service. This is a little bit different now in bigger cities, but maybe not in the countryside overall. And not sure if that's something that people are really aware of. And also, I think it's always great if people go back to Germany, to the places where their ancestors came from. And then I think now it's definitely changing because also my father just told me, oh, they have like they put some new of these a little bit controversial, like these Stolpersteine, like these golden small bricks
Yes.
they put at places where people of the Jewish community used to live. But I feel I mean, it's not meant to be disrespectful if people can actually walk over it, but it's like, especially in a place where you don't have daily contact with Jewish community, I think it's very worthwhile to point out also here there were Jews living here, and it's because of our actions that there's no Jewish community here today.
Rabbi, if I can add something, just to connect to that and maybe talk about like to summarize like something that I want to say. Michael, I think we talked about it. I don't think it's disrespectful. When I visited Germany, I found it very moving that when I walk in places, I walk literally on living memorial that tells the story of the people who lived there. And I know that there are sensitivities because the Nazis took down cemeteries and used the tombstones to as pavements. So I understand the sensitivity, but as someone who visited Germany and saw that, I actually thought it was beautiful and remarkable and a beautiful way to pay tribute and remember one of humanity's worst chapters and say that we move forward, but we remember and we respect. So, as an Israeli and as a Jew, I think it's commendable the way the German people commemorate the Holocaust. I wish more would have done the same. And my, I think, like closing statement that I want to say about Israel and Germany, and I think I started with that. It's easy to talk about the Holocaust, but it's much more than that. What's really especially unique about the Israel-US relationship is that it's not that they're just based about history. They're based about a common choice for the future. History explained how we got here, but today we have our shared interests and shared values that explain why we move forward. We remember the past always, and that's what you just mentioned, but we also built a future together. And I think our relationship, in many ways, it's one of the greatest reconciliation relationship in history. And it didn't go without a fight at the beginning in Israel when people oppose that. And I think when we talk as diplomats and people with future in our civil service, there is a generation that founded the Israel-Germany relations, and our job is to make sure that we will continue to build this relationship with all the burden of history, but with a forward-looking approach of what we can achieve together, not just talking about history. So they go by side, and that's what I hope that we can continue and do. Like I said in our first meeting, do programs together about innovation and culture and celebrations, not just International Holocaust Remembrance Day programs, because we have much more to show to everybody about our relationship.
We are more than victims of history, and there is a living culture. And as we say, Am Yisrael Chai, the people of Israel continues to live, and this is really a celebration of the present and the future. So to our two consul generals, thank you so very much for making time for me and for our congregation. I know people will be very interested in not only what you said, but the relationship that you have affected. It speaks volumes about our present and our future. Toda rabah.
Toda rabah.